Aloha from Maui. This is Blaze Anderson, and I'm here today because I want to share what I've learned about using the A6XXX series underwater housing from Sea Frogs that goes with my Sony A6400 camera. Now I recently picked that up for a trip. I added the 6-inch dome port, the long standard port, and the standard flat port, and the short flat port. Also added 3 lenses, the 16 to 50 millimeter Sony 3.5 lens, the Sony 18 to 105 f4 lens, and the other Sony wide-angle rectilinear 10 to 18 millimeter f4 lens. So both with the cinema constant f4s, decently fast lens, could be a little faster, but I have all the ports. You can see here the zoom rings and the neoprene covers and some of the other accessories, and I want to share how to use them and some of the quirks to that. So follow me here. I find that with all the dome ports to keep track of the housing itself and the lenses, it's tough in a soft pack to carry that around. So I got this Nanook 935 hard case. It's perfect for travel on, really durable. You have to do a little custom foam cutting yourself, but most everything fits. Let's open it up and take a look. I've got my 6-inch dome port. I've got the long port with the 18 to 105 lens. I've got the 10 to 18 lens and the primary housing. My light rod can fit in here also. That, like I said, there's little squares, you cut them out, you pull out the sections, and kind of custom fit your camera. I can also put my vacuum tester here, leak sensor here, and you see how I store the lenses. All right, let's pull out the main housing. So go somewhere soft to lay your housing down on so it doesn't scratch the front ring of the port. Pop the lid off, keep it somewhere clean. This is where you definitely don't want any dust in the air or anything else falling in place here, hairs. And if I'm walking away for any length of time, I put the cover back on as well. Alright, so we're replacing the camera with the lens inside the housing. You need the zoom ring to go around the lens so that you can use the dial wheel and the gears inside here to do your zoom. Now on this lens, the 16 to 50 stock from Sony, all these lenses you want to shoot with your UV covers off. It doesn't hurt too much to have it on, but it's clear and you don't need it inside there for your underwater shots. Now when we're using a different lens, anything bigger, we actually have to remove this ring guide, which actually helps the wheel stay in place so it doesn't jiggle around and keeps the guide on the zoom ring. For this lens, we can just lay the ring inside there. You can see the flange goes down into the housing or the dome port. You can see this flange goes inside the port. Make sure your camera's off and your top switch is off, because that little U-groove has to align with the little nub on your on-off switch. So one of the things you're doing as you're placing this camera is not only sliding it around the rubber ring and lightly weaseling it in there, making sure this guide stays in place with this little rubber component that likes to slip in and out, so keep an eye on that. And have that notch line up around the nub so everything works underwater. So it's a gentle little operation, fingers on both sides, and kind of lightly work it back and forth, a little bit of pressure, and make sure everything's set. And you can tell, keeping a little bit of thumb pressure on the camera, you can flip your on off, and look at that one didn't line up. So I now have to pull the ring back out. So when you place the camera, make sure the little nub and the on-off switch line up. And as you place the lens gently into the rubber zoom ring, lightly wiggle it back and forth, making sure this guide stays in place. And you can put a little pressure on the camera and make sure your on-off works before you close up your housing. Okay? So everything's in place. So make sure the camera's nice and snug inside the little rubber stoppers everywhere. Place your back case on the back of the camera housing. Double check there's nothing in there though, no hairs, no threads, nothing like that. I have this little even strap I use for a carabiner clip, make sure it's not placed across there. That has been known to be many problems with flooding. Lay the housing on there, bring the metal clips over the top, and simultaneously is what I like to do, is push them down and make sure they lock with the little lock tabs. Alright, I've got the actual little shade screen that goes on here. I've got it strapped, looped around the bottom here with my Cobra extension cord that I keep clipped to my BCD or my weight belt depending on what I'm shooting. And a little shade guard. Yeah, it gives you a little advantage underwater to get a little more clear vision out of the viewfinder. But primarily it's to help keep things from scratching against the viewfinder underwater if we're bumping into it. Even when I just carry it on my BCD, it rubs there. So it's nice to have on board and keep it leashed so you don't lose it. It comes off easy. Alright, so we power up the camera. On the left side here you see is the zoom ring. It brings your zoom in and out from the back, which actually also reads your distance on the monitor screen. Alright, as I transport my camera, if I'm going to take it just in a backpack, let's say to my normal work routine, diving at the Four Seasons, I'm going to put the neoprene cover on it at least for my backpack. I usually don't bring the whole travel case because I'm just doing one setup during the day. Lately for stock shoots, the 1650s 3.5 has been a great lens for just standard shoot some tourists dive in the water. But once I want to do something fancier, alright, so as I'm packing up for work then, you place your little neoprene cover over, and it gets a little tricky. You don't want to snag too many things here, all your buttons and switches, so you have to kind of work it, all the edges over the top. It is definitely a snug fit. So you just work it on the top, push the housing through, and you can put the little strap on to hold it right here, but it doesn't really matter. I've just got my little Cobra cord hanging out the side. That goes in the case. I like this, just don't have to worry about any scratches on your port lens. Even though it's glass, it's pretty hard. I don't like scratches there, or nicks and bumps, and just anything else from getting snagged. So it's nice and protected already as is. Alright, as I get my camera ready, I decide I'm going to shoot my 10 to 18 millimeter lens, the f4. Turns out to be a great lens for underwater. And as a reminder, we're in a Sony mirrorless APS-C censored camera, and it is cropped sensor. So you take your 35 millimeter measurements in their lenses and you have to times it by 1.5 crop factor, so just times 1.5. So that 10 to 18 becomes a 15 to 27 lens, but still an ideal range to shoot in underwater. You can get pretty close. It's a rectilinear lens, so you don't get a lot of distortion, but it shoots much better in the dome port because of the refraction of the wide angle and the water. It adds a lot of curve to it if it's in the flat port lens. And in this port, the standard port, as you go out to 10, which is the further setting, the longer setting on this lens, believe it or not, it touches the lens or the inside of the glass port at about 11.5 millimeters. So you never get your true 10 in this flat port anyways. Well, the first step is to remove the camera, of course. We're going to take off the viewfinder protector and shade. Unbuckle our back case. And then pull the camera. As we pull the camera, the ring is going to pop off, and that zoom ring is only for that 16 to 50 lens. And we're going to also pull off this guide. So put the camera aside and the guide. Next we're going to this little screw in here, Phillips head, with the little black safety piece that just locks the dome port in place. With this little black plastic piece that locks the flat port into place. Luckily, the vacuum setup comes with a little Phillips screwdriver, perfect for that size. Just to the side. Now, if you see the white dot here and the slight indent in the molding of the white housing here, we're going to rotate those two. It's pretty common sense because it's just like a lens. And pop it off and remove it. There's our housing. Also for travel, you could travel and store that like that. You don't want to scratch any of the surface with anything sharp. It is where your O-ring sits for your housing ports. And you definitely don't want a groove or a leak inside there. Also, when you're playing with ports, you don't want a lot of flex here. It can cause leaking. I've got a couple covers for the dome port. I went ahead and bought the neoprene one because I felt that the velvet one that comes with it is a little thin. It's nice for just general storage or use, but the neoprene is about a 2 millimeter and it keeps a little more protection. It's also padding to put the camera and the port on. This plastic port is not that scratch resistant, so you definitely want to watch out for anything sharp as you baby this when you carry it around. We're actually going to leave the velvet cover on to do this operation. Alright, now I found so far in putting this dome port on, it's really stiff. It's got a really tight seal around the ring connector point here. And you're going to always want to lubricate the O-ring to help it get on there and adjust. So I kind of lightly push together the O-ring, find the spot to pull it over the edge. You really don't want to put too much stretch or pressure in it. Want to make sure it's clean. And whenever we're putting any silicone lubricant on an O-ring, it's just a minor amount. Just a light skim, as light as you can get away with, no excess. So I tend to rub a little bit across my fingers, get a nice little coat on it, and then rotate my fingers around so the entire O-ring is covered. And that tends to take any excess off and leave it on the exterior fingers, so you just have a smooth coat. And then make sure the O-ring is seated all the way around. Well, let's take a look at this dome port before we put it on the housing case. I always use the velvet cover at least to handle it. This plexiglass plastic here is really scratch sensitive. Just a little bit of marks can leave scratches that can distort in your image. Sometimes it'll shoot through it though, but we want to protect it. So you take a look at this 6-inch dome, gives a lot of periphery. It's got a built-in shade portion of the housing, so it shades out any glare. In the background you can see the simple O-ring around there and the little tabs that lock into the housing. You can also remove this shade ring here and go to a flat ring that helps seal the plastic port for use when you have the pistol grip and you're taking it in the surf, so it doesn't catch the waves as much, as more streamlined to get to the water. But for diving, I like this to help protect the lens. And if you're panning along and you accidentally hit a turtle, no, the reef, something like that. Alright, like I said, we'll put the cover back on, handle it with the cover. Also, if you get anything inside here, you want to use a really soft cloth and just lightly touch it to get any lint off, anything like that. You don't want to smear it or scratch it from the inside. Now, we see another white dot. And like I said, this one's a little firm, so we line up the spot here. And you have to use the shade cover for some pressure, and then because of silicone lubricant, it slid and rotated into place pretty easily. And next we replace the plastic block portion that goes in the little groove. And all you have to do is lightly snug this, as long as it won't vibrate loose with any shaking of the camera, which I doubt. Just a nice little right in there. All right, we'll put this to the side for a moment here. Next, we're going to change the lenses on the camera. So I'll unlock the 16 to 50, get it in place. Pull the back case off the 10 to 18 and switch places. Now notice, red gel alert. I've got red gel in my camera for underwater shooting. Go on magicfilters.com for more insiders on that. And then as I place my lens on, it's good to go. Once again, I want to make sure I've got no UV filter on this lens. So before we place the camera inside, we always make sure these little rubber stoppers are in place. I did have one of these pull out on me recently. And with this zoom ring on this lens, you can also keep the guide in place, putting it inside the two nubs, putting it inside the two receiver holes for the two posts. Then we drop our guide ring on. Now you're not going to be able to see this here, but really small writing, 10 to 18 millimeters, so you know which one of these rings works for each lens. And the flange component of this goes interior to the dome port. It's also the same ring you'd use if you use the flat port. And just like the flat port, we want to slide the camera in gently. You have to take the lens inside the rubber housing and kind of work it back and forth there. And as we seat it, we give a little thumb pressure here to the camera. And with all these cameras that have viewfinders, whether they're optical or electronic, as soon as you put the back case to the housing on, it goes to the light sensor and it automatically turns off the monitor like your face is there. And you want to be using the monitor more than the viewfinder, at least at first. You can do some framing, but it's pretty small on this camera. I think it's better to use the color monitor. So you need to go into settings, go into menu, come to the second upper tab to page 6, I believe it is, yep, and go to Finder Monitor. And under that you want to select Monitor Manual and just select that. Okay, because it's automatic is going to be the setting by default. Then we're going to come up and go a couple more pages down. If you see 6, 7, we're going to go page 8 on the second tab. We're going to go to Custom Keys, and we can talk about these settings in my other video, but we're going to come into the rear settings, go to tab 4, and under the center button here, which is this button here, I've selected that it'll toggle between Finder and Monitor. And that way, if you do need to take some a look through your monitor for just framing generally, or just to want a different look, or just when you're actually shooting the camera above water out of the housing, you can switch back and forth. So I hit that setting, that's selected, come back out of menu, 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 and as I'm back in view, now you can't see it, but there's the viewfinder and there's the monitor right now that covers on. Viewfinder, monitor. So it's a quick setting check. There we go. Now we can place our back cover, locking it down, make sure the strap's in the way, lock, lock. Over our cover. Now if you're going the water in and out, you can actually have this neoprene cover on it to protect it unless you're actually actively using the camera. So like I said, you don't want any scratches on your port. It is only about an $80 replacement for the plastic component of this, but better just to protect it. Turn the camera on, double check my functions, double check my zoom ring is working. You know, this lens doesn't come up on the screen what magnification you're at, but it's easy to tell. There's my 10 to 18. Take a test shot. Everything good. You can do a little test video. Then replace your monitor shade. And you're ready to dive. Next, let's go big. I'm going to swap out the dome port for the long flat port, which will house the 18 to 105 lens. And once again, as a crop, that's a 27 to like 153 lens because of the crop magnification. All right, let's get a cover on inside the dome port. And I can put it even top of my neoprene cover just to extra protect it. Pop off my monitor shade. Undo the metal latches and pull the camera. In this case, to get the camera out, it's a little stiff. I like to reach in and pull the guide out. And I usually just leave the ring on the camera lens that it goes with. Put that to the side. We're going to need our screwdriver to unscrew the port. Keep that lock handy, screwdriver. And then remove the dome port. Give it a light counterclockwise twist, and it pops right out. Now here's the long port, and you can see the difference between the short and the long. Well, this is really the standard, which is great with the 16 to 50, and you can actually use that 10 to 18 inside of there, but you won't get the same quality out of this standard flat port as you will the dome port. The diffusion from the flat glass narrows the field of view on the 10 to 18, even though it's a rectilinear lens, and you get a full width to the angle of view on the dome port. Or we use the long flat port when we're going to zoom lenses like the 18 to 105 Sony lens, the 16 to 35 millimeter lens, or some of the stock zoom lenses. This gives us a little bit of room to zoom if we have extended zoom lenses, but this 18 to 105 is actually a fixed zoom, so it doesn't change its position. Then when we go to attach the long flat port, we're going to check the O-ring. Then we can also lubricate the O-ring. And once again, just the lightest amount. Down between the fingers and make sure it really spreads out and you don't have any thick spots. Just the skin. And take the port, look for the white dot on top, which is just really hint of a faint glow right there. Place it in the notch as well, give it a little clockwise twist. Replace the lock. See where that is. Snug. And now lens swap. So I told you I leave the rings on the lenses so I can mix and match easily if I'm doing any underwater shooting. Of course I take them off for above water. On this lens, it's got this big old flange. You actually have to have the ring on here, and this is a hard plastic. You have to have it on the lens already when you put it on the camera. It doesn't slide over the outer housing like the other ones do. So as I do my lens swap, I make sure that the ring's all the way forward and it's in place with the flange forward like that. Find the white dots, rotate clockwise, boom, you're locked on. All right. Now, the other tricky component here is this guide. You can't just drop the camera in because the guide has to be on the other side of the ring here. So as you get this in, you have to drop the ring in, or this guide in behind it. And of course, we're never going to shoot with our dust cap on, and we don't shoot with any of our filter rings on because they actually always touch up against the glass. So as I drop the camera in, it finds the gears pretty early because I had that slid all the way forward, so it has some more room to drop. And this is the point that gives me a little bit of room right here to put this back in its spot here in position. Then I can do that same thing I've been doing, is slightly pushing the camera into place. It keeps the ring nice and flat and level and in place. I make sure with some thumb pressure that the on-off switch works. There it goes, there it goes. And now I can put my back cover on. Remember, every time you do the cover, make sure you don't see anything visible inside the O-rings anywhere, or hairs or anything like that all loose. Turn the power on. Monitor shade back on. Check the zoom. That's how you know the ring's set. Nothing like getting underwater and your zoom ring didn't get aligned. And now you can't zoom, you're just stuck at whatever focal length you had in the camera. So here's my 18 to 105 all the way out. When I'm all the way out at 105, this lens doesn't move. It's a fixed zoom lens. Really nice too. You don't get any shadow, distortion, or reflection because of it dropping out. Now I do have a light handle for this camera, and I don't always use the light, but I definitely use the handle. And the primary reason for this is it gives me much more lateral stability when I'm shooting video, and even for shooting stills. Something nice to hold on to. I can still reach across and get the zoom wheel. You'll see that in a second here. There we go. And I attached my Sola 1200. Great light. You know, use a little more power sometimes during broad daylight, but as far as anything in the mornings or evenings up close, it's a great spot. It's got a perfect focal width to go with my lenses. Just add inside the U-joint there. The clamp, I get this really high. I tend to just ride it right here over the top of my lens, just for cruising around and being ready to shoot. I know with backscatter that can be a little bit of an issue with the diagonal, but if it's clear water, it doesn't matter much. So the handle gives you a lot better lateral stability for even panning, and it also helps your tilt. You don't get this diagonal shake that when you put your hand just on the side of the housing. I actually find it's even easier to use the zoom function right there. And then with the light bar across the top, of course, this could be strobes. I like to shoot just with video lights. I'm shooting more video. I can readjust this up, down, left, right, depending on my subject, get it way out here, and even bring it quite a bit forward to get the light even closer to the subject plane and face in front of my lens due to the angle refraction. I still have a lot of room to work with. So this is a great setup, really handy, fairly inexpensive, and get some great shots.